Hello, my name is Bruce Van Horn, and I run the website maddevskills.com, which is dedicated to teaching people from all walks of life new skills in computer programming. Python is becoming increasingly popular as the first language a lot of people learn. However, setting up a Windows computer to work with Python comes with a few challenges. In this course, we'll spend the next hour or so going over step by step the process for setting up your Windows computer as a Python development powerhouse. You don't need an expensive computer. Pretty much anything made in the last 15 years, except maybe for Chromebooks, would make an excellent coding computer. All the tools I'm going to show you are free, so it won't cost you anything to go through this exercise. And at the end of this course, you'll have an operational Python development workstation, and you'll be all set to unleash your coding skills on the world, which is true even if you're just starting out. Let me walk you through this. Let's get started.
So we're going to start with a fresh copy of Windows, meaning that it is an install with nothing installed on it already except with whatever Windows came with. And of course, there's going to be a lot of bloatware in the way, and I'll take some of that off, but that's not the focus of what we're doing here. So it's going to be Windows 10, all the updates are applied, but we haven't installed anything to it. It's a fresh install. Next, we're going to install Git for Windows. Now, maybe you don't use Git. There are probably 2 or 3 of you out there that don't. It isn't my favorite either, but it is ubiquitous. That's a fancy word that means everybody uses it. Everybody uses Git. Everybody uses GitHub. It is easily the most popular revision control system out there. But if you want to use something else, be my guest. You can use Subversion. That's sort of the old school thing that came before Git. I still use it where I work just because our developers had it installed when I got there. And we also use Git, but we also use Subversion. And if you're happy with it, there's no tremendous reason to switch. Maybe you're using TFS, Microsoft's revision control system, Team Foundation server. So there's a couple of other different possibilities. Perforce comes to mind. You can just substitute installing whatever you intend to use. If you don't have one picked or you haven't spent the time to research each of those options, then I would suggest you start with Git. There's nothing stopping you from having several different revision control systems at play at the same time. The next thing we're going to want to do is probably the biggest reason why I made this video. A lot of people think you can just download the Python installer and run it and you're done. And that's not exactly true. If you're creating things that only use the standard library, then you're done. That's all you needed to do. But as soon as you start using third-party libraries, a lot of those have to be built on your machine. And one of the big distinctions between Windows and the Mac OS and Linux operating systems is that Windows does not come with any sort of compiling tool. Compiling is just a step where you take source code and you turn it into an executable on your machine. So when you go to install a bunch of third-party libraries, very often what happens is the C or C++ source code gets downloaded for it and built. It's expected to be built on your machine. But as I said, Windows doesn't have this installed by default, so we need to install the .NET build tools. You could alternatively install Visual Studio, and that would be a good way to go. But I'm not going to assume that you're going to do anything with it, so I'm just going to go with the bare minimum. We have to have the .NET build tools for C++. So we'll get those installed. Finally, we get to probably what you thought this video was going to be, just someone stepping through the Python installer. There are a few options on it that you probably would like to change. I usually change the installation location, things like that. But it's pretty straightforward. The next thing we'll do is install a few libraries. We're going to install these globally because you're going to need these in every project. So things like virtual env, which is the virtual environment tool, things that you're going to use over and over again, those are going to get installed globally. Next, we're going to install the PyCharm integrated development environment. So I use PyCharm every day. You don't have to use this as your editor if you don't want to. There is a free version of PyCharm, and that's the one that I'm going to be installing. But there are a lot of other options out there. Visual Studio has Python tools in it. They're very nice. They're comparable to PyCharm. So if you have access to that, then you could use Visual Studio. The only thing that I caution you against is in Visual Studio, in the installer, it asks you if you want to install Python, and when you install the Python workflow. And if you do that, you're probably not going to get the latest version of Python. You're going to get whatever Microsoft has cleared to work with Visual Studio, and that's not usually the latest. So I don't usually go that route, but you can certainly still use Visual Studio as your IDE if you want to. Other options, you can use anything really capable of writing text files. So you could use something like Sublime Text or Atom or Visual Studio Code. All of those are free except maybe for Sublime, that generally is nagware. They want you to pay, I think, $60 for it or something like that, which incidentally is roughly the same cost as PyCharm Professional. So if you're just getting started, Sublime is probably not a great investment. There are plenty of other tools that you can use that are free or more capable for the same amount of money. Once we get everything installed, we need to create a very simple project just to make sure everything works. So we'll run it through its paces, make sure everything's okay, install something that isn't part of the standard library, and once we're happy, then our machine is effectively ready to start working with Python.
If you found value in this video, if you learned something new, help me out with a like and subscribe. For more videos on software development and DevOps from a developer's perspective, check us out at maddevskills.com or on Twitter @devskills.